The Gilded Bean was a world unto itself, a pocket of rarefied air and hushed ambition tucked away in the steel and glass canyons of Manhattan's financial district. To the men and women who conducted the symphonies of global markets, it was neutral ground, a place where billion-dollar deals were sketched on napkins over single-origin espressos. To Clara Hayes, it was purgatory. For 10 hours a day, she was a ghost in a black apron, refilling water glasses, wiping marble countertops, and perfecting the delicate rosetta on lattes for people who never made eye contact. The tips paid for her rent on a fifth-floor walk-up in Washington Heights, her utilities, and the crushing tuition for a master's degree in data science at Columbia that felt more like a distant dream than an approaching destination. Her life was a study in beige. It was the color of her apartment walls, the bland taste of her microwave dinners, and the muted exhaustion she felt at the end of each day. She found her only solace in numbers, in the clean, predictable patterns of code that she studied late into the night. Algorithms were logical, comforting. They made sense in a world that often didn't. It was a world away from the one her grandfather had inhabited, a world she only glimpsed through his stories. He had been a cryptanalyst for the NSA, a man who saw the world not in shades of gray, but in ciphers waiting to be broken, in patterns hiding in plain sight. Before a sudden heart attack had stolen him from her 3 years ago, he had taught her things, not just the formal languages of Python and R, but the subtler, more vital language of people. He taught her to watch, to listen, and to see what others deliberately missed. He had recognized her eidetic memory not as a parlor trick, but as a tool, and he had trained it, honed it. He taught her to read lips with an accuracy that was both a gift and a curse, skills he called tools for navigating a world that rarely says what it means. She rarely used them now. In her beige world, the most complex code she deciphered was the passive-aggressive tone of a customer whose oat milk had been frothed 1 degree too hot. Her grandfather's world of shadows and secrets felt like a fairy tale, a story to be remembered, not lived. Until Julian Thorne walked in. He didn't so much enter the Gilded Bean as conquer it. The ambient hum of conversation, the clinking of ceramic on saucer, faltered as if a conductor had suddenly silenced the orchestra. Heads turned, and a palpable shift in the atmosphere followed him, like a pressure drop before a storm. He was tall, dressed in a charcoal suit so perfectly tailored it seemed less like fabric and more like a second skin, a dark armor forged in Savile Row. His dark hair was swept back from a face of sharp, aristocratic angles, a face that could have been carved from unforgiving marble. But it was his eyes that held the room hostage. They were a pale, glacial blue, devoid of warmth, and they scanned the cafe with the cool, predatory assessment of a hawk circling its prey. He was flanked by 2 lawyers, older men who radiated the same expensive, soulless competence, their expressions carefully neutral. "Thorne," whispered Maya, the other barista on shift, her hand momentarily freezing over the steam wand. "Table 6. Don't spill anything. Don't breathe too loud. Just don't." Clara nodded, her hands already moving with the practiced efficiency born of 1,000 lattes, pulling shots of espresso into pre-warmed ceramic cups. She had heard the whispers about Julian Thorne, the Vulture of Wall Street. The name wasn't just hyperbole. It was a reputation earned through a series of brutal, surgical corporate raids. He didn't build companies, he consumed them. He moved through the market like a force of nature, a blizzard that left hostile takeovers and shattered careers in its wake. He was a man who dealt in absolutes, in profit and loss, with no room for the messy variable of sentiment. He was the human embodiment of the cold, hard logic she usually found so comforting in code. But in him, it was terrifying. As she approached their table, the air grew thick with a tension that was almost visible. The lawyers were speaking in low, urgent tones, their words clipped and precise, a secret language of finance and law. Julian was silent, his gaze fixed on a sleek tablet displaying complex financial charts that shifted and morphed in real time. He didn't acknowledge her presence as she set down the 3 coffees with a steady hand, placing each one on its coaster with a soft, respectful click. The Phoenix Project is vulnerable, but only through the legacy code and their original server architecture, one lawyer was saying, his voice a low murmur. If we can exploit the Cerberus backdoor during the quarterly earnings call, the system integrity check will fail. Julian held up a single, elegant hand, silencing the man mid-sentence. He gestured dismissively in Clara's general direction without ever lifting his eyes from the tablet. Water. No ice. The sheer arrogance of it, the casual reduction of her to an invisible function, a disembodied hand meant to serve his needs, pricked at Clara's composure. It was a familiar sting, one she'd grown accustomed to in this line of work. But coming from him, it felt different. Sharper. She retreated to the counter, her jaw tight. As she filled the heavy crystal glass from the filtered tap, she watched them. Her grandfather's voice, a warm and patient ghost, echoed in her mind. Observation is a weapon, Clara. Be patient. Let the world reveal itself to you. They had lowered their voices even further, confident in the surrounding noise of the cafe, a bubble of privacy created by their own imposing presence. But Clara didn't need to hear them. From her vantage point behind the gleaming chrome of the espresso machine, she had a clear line of sight. Her eyes focused on the lead lawyer's mouth, and the world around her went silent. The clatter of the cafe faded away, replaced by the clean, distinct shapes his words made. They formed in her mind, clear and precise as printed text. The Cerberus protocol is a ghost. It's designed to look like a standard system error. We trigger a cascade failure in their Q2 earnings report. The data becomes corrupted, creating a panic. The stock will plummet before they can even issue a correction. Thorne acquires a controlling interest for pennies on the dollar by Friday close. It was brutal, surgical, vile. The Phoenix Project was a small but beloved tech firm known for its ethical practices, a rare unicorn in a cutthroat industry. They were pioneers in developing accessible technology for people with disabilities. Julian Thorne was about to gut it for parts, destroy years of noble work for a fractional gain in his ever-expanding empire. A familiar, helpless anger simmered in Clara's chest. It was the same impotent rage she felt when she read about corporate greed, about powerful men who broke the world for their own amusement and profit. Julian's lips moved then, a curt, single word that she read with perfect clarity. Execute. The meeting concluded. The lawyers gathered their papers, their faces grimly satisfied. As Julian stood, a man in a rumpled suit leaving a nearby table seemed to lose his footing, stumbling and bumping into him hard. "Watch it!" Julian snapped, his voice a whip crack of annoyance as he brushed at the sleeve of his immaculate jacket in disgust. The man mumbled a hasty apology and hurried out the door. But Clara saw it. Her mind, trained to notice the smallest detail, had captured the moment in perfect, high-definition slow motion. In the fraction of a second of contact, The clumsy man's hand had brushed against the back of Julian's suit jacket, leaving behind a tiny metallic disc no bigger than a ladybug. It clung to the dark wool, nearly invisible. A magnetic bug, simple, effective, and utterly compromising. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. "This is not your business," a voice in her head screamed. "This is a war between titans, and you are nothing but an ant on the battlefield. Getting involved is insane. You have rent to pay, a degree to finish. Turn away, forget what you saw, and go back to steaming milk. What is the cost of inaction?" Her grandfather's voice whispered back. Julian and his lawyers were at the door. She had seconds. Her mind raced, sifting through a mental archive of her grandfather's lessons, searching for a way, a signal that was both untraceable and undeniable, something that wouldn't expose her. And then, a memory surfaced, a story he had told her about his early days at the NSA, a piece of old, nearly forgotten Cold War spycraft used for moments of extreme compromise. She grabbed a fresh linen napkin and a pen from the service station. Her hand flew across the paper, the pen scratching out a short, cryptic phrase. She moved quickly, her footsteps silent on the polished concrete floor, intercepting Julian just as he was about to push the heavy glass door open. "Excuse me, sir," she said, her voice miraculously steady despite the tremor in her hands. "You forgot this." She held out the napkin. Julian Thorne turned, his icy eyes filled with an annoyance so profound it was almost palpable. He was a man whose time was measured in millions of dollars per minute, and she was wasting it. He didn't reach for the napkin. "I didn't forget anything," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument, a clear dismissal. "I believe you did," she insisted, her voice quiet but firm. She took a half-step forward and pushed the napkin into his hand, forcing him to take it. His fingers brushed hers, a brief, cold contact that sent a strange jolt up her arm. He glanced at the napkin, his brow furrowing in irritation, ready to discard it. Then he read the words she had written. "The canary is singing in the coal mine." For the first time since he had walked in, Julian Thorne's mask of detached, absolute power cracked. It was a subtle shift, a flicker in those glacial eyes, a sudden stillness in his posture. But to Clara, who was watching with heightened senses, it was as dramatic as a seismic shock. The irritation vanished, replaced by a sharp, penetrating astonishment. It was a look of disbelief, of sudden, startling reassessment. He saw her. For the very first time, he was truly seeing the woman standing before him. He searched her face for a clue, a sign of duplicity or fear, but she held her expression neutral, the perfect bland mask of a service worker just doing her job. The code was an old NSA alert, a deep-level warning from the height of the Cold War, a signal so obscure, so archaic, that no one outside of a very specific, very small circle of intelligence historians and retired operatives would ever know its meaning. It translated to a single, urgent message. "You have been compromised by a live audio surveillance device. The threat is immediate and hostile. Acknowledge and extract." He said nothing. He simply held her gaze for a long, charged moment that seemed to stretch into eternity. Then, with a curt nod that was almost imperceptible, he turned and swept out of the cafe, his lawyers trailing in his wake, utterly oblivious to the silent, high-stakes drama that had just unfolded. Clara retreated to the relative safety of the counter, her legs shaking so badly she had to grip the edge of the marble to stay upright. She had just lit a match in a room full of gasoline. She could only pray she wouldn't be caught in the inevitable explosion. The next 24 hours were the longest and most paranoid of Clara's life. She went through the motions of her shift, her senses on high alert, her mind replaying the scene at the coffee shop on an endless, agonizing loop. Every black town car that idled at the curb outside, every man in a dark suit who glanced her way for a fraction of a second too long, sent a jolt of pure, undiluted fear through her. She had crossed a line, stepped out of her safe, beige world and into one of vibrant, terrifying color. She felt exposed, marked. That night, she couldn't study. The elegant logic of the algorithms on her screen seemed trivial, childish. Instead, she found herself falling down a digital rabbit hole, researching Julian Thorne. The articles she found painted a chilling picture of a brilliant, ruthless prodigy who had built his empire, Thorne Industries, from the ashes of his father's legacy. There were no mentions of family, no personal details, only a long, cold list of corporate conquests. He was a ghost in his own life, a man defined only by his immense power and the fear he inspired. She also searched for the Phoenix Project. It was founded by a man named Arthur Vance, a different Vance, no relation, but the coincidence was unsettling. He had poured his life savings into creating accessible technology for people with disabilities after his daughter was paralyzed in an accident. They were on the verge of a major breakthrough with a new neural interface. Julian's takeover would not just gut the company, it would destroy a dream that offered hope to thousands. The thought left a sour, metallic taste in her mouth. Had she done the right thing, warning a shark that a rival shark was hunting him, knowing he would then be free to devour the innocent? The following afternoon, as she was wiping down the counter at the Gilded Bean, the air once again grew still. A woman in a sharp gray pantsuit that screamed "lawyer" entered. She bypassed the growing line of caffeine-starved financiers and walked directly to Clara. "Clara Hayes?" the woman asked. Her voice was polite but held the unyielding firmness of a court order. "Yes?" Clara's heart began a frantic, heavy rhythm against her ribs. "Mr. Thorne requests your presence. A car is waiting outside." It wasn't a question or an invitation. It was a summons. "I'm working," she said weakly, the words sounding hollow even to her own ears. "Your manager has already been generously compensated for your time," the woman replied, her expression as unreadable as a legal document. "Please, don't make this difficult." The implicit threat was clear. The drive was silent, suffocating. The car, a black Audi with windows so tinted they turned the bustling city into a muted, distant film, moved smoothly through the traffic, isolating her from the familiar world outside. They didn't go to the towering skyscraper that bore the Thorne Industries logo. Instead, they pulled up to a discreet, unmarked brownstone in Soho, a building that blended seamlessly with the neighborhood's chic art galleries and boutiques. The woman led her through the unassuming entrance to a private elevator, which opened directly into a sprawling penthouse apartment. The space was a monument to minimalist wealth. Floor-to-ceiling windows, 2 stories high, offered a breathtaking, godlike panorama of the city. The furniture was sparse and modern, more sculpture than seating. The art on the walls abstract and clearly worth more than her entire student loan debt. It was less a home and more a fortress in the sky, a sterile, silent observation deck. Julian Thorne was standing by the window, his back to her, looking out over the city he seemed to own. He turned as she entered. He had shed the suit jacket, and in a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his forearms, he looked younger, but somehow even more intimidating. The raw power was no longer contained by tailored wool. "Ms. Hayes," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the silent room. "Thank you for coming." "I wasn't given much of a choice," she retorted, her fear sharpening her tongue into a weapon, however small. A ghost of a smile, a fleeting, humorless quirk of his lips, touched his face. "No, you weren't. Please, have a seat." He gestured to a severe-looking leather armchair. She remained standing, her arms crossed over her chest. "What do you want?" "First," he said, walking toward a sleek, metallic bar that looked like it belonged on a spaceship, "I want to know how a barista in a downtown coffee shop knows a Cold War-era NSA counter-surveillance code that has been out of commission for over 30 years. He poured 2 glasses of water, his movements economical and precise. He placed one on a low table in front of her chair, a silent command. "My grandfather," she said, her voice tight. "He worked for the government. He liked telling stories." "I know," Julian said, taking a seat opposite her, the vast space making the distance between them feel like a chasm. Elias Vance, cryptanalyst GS-15, recruited in 1978, specialized in Soviet-era ciphers and predictive analytics. He resigned abruptly in 1999 after a project he was leading, codenamed Prometheus, was allegedly compromised. He passed away 3 years ago. Official cause of death: acute myocardial infarction. The detailed clinical recitation of her grandfather's life, a life she had only known in fragments, sent a profound chill down her spine. "You've been investigating me." "I investigate everything that presents as a strategic anomaly," he corrected, his tone cool and detached. "And an anonymous warning using a defunct NSA code is, to put it mildly, an anomaly of the highest order. My security team found the bug. It was high grade, military spec, the kind not available to the public. They activated it the moment I entered this building." He leaned forward, his glacial blue eyes pinning her in place. "The warning you gave me was not just timely, it was critical. It allowed my cybersecurity team to initiate a digital counter-assault, a trap. We traced the bug signal back to its source. The source was the primary data hub of Ethelred Consortium." The name meant nothing to Clara. It sounded old, powerful, and vaguely British. "They are my primary rival," Julian explained, as if sensing her ignorance. "And they are far more than just a corporation. They operate in the shadows, using methods that make my own seem tame by comparison. My attempted takeover of the Phoenix Project was a direct challenge to their interests. They were the silent partners backing it financially." Clara felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. This was so much bigger than one company. "So, they were spying on you to get an edge in a business deal. They were spying on me to find a weakness, a vulnerability they could exploit for total annihilation," he said grimly. "And thanks to your warning, I was able to not only neutralize their surveillance, but also use their own compromised signal to plant a logic bomb in their network. It triggered a series of automated high-frequency trades this morning. As of an hour ago, their losses are estimated at just under $1 billion. The sheer scale of it was staggering, incomprehensible. She had passed him a napkin, and in doing so, had inadvertently fired a shot in a war she didn't even know existed. A war fought with algorithms and satellites, where the casualties were measured in billions. "What does this have to do with me?" she asked, her voice a whisper, though she already feared she knew the answer. Ethelred does not take losses well. They do not tolerate failure, Julian said, his voice dropping, becoming more intense. They will want to know how I knew about the bug. They will conduct a thorough post-mortem. They will retrace every step their operative took. They will review the security footage from the Gilded Bean, and they will see you, a seemingly insignificant barista, pass me a note just moments after their operative planted the device. They are not fools, Miss Hayes. They will make the connection. They will want to know what you know, and their methods of inquiry are persuasive. The room suddenly felt cold. The air thin. You're saying I'm in danger. I'm saying you've been a dead woman walking since the moment I read that napkin, he stated with brutal honesty. But it's more complicated than that. My investigation into your grandfather didn't just stop with his service record. Elias Vance didn't have a heart attack, Ms. Hayes. He was eliminated. It was clean, untraceable, a chemically induced cardiac arrest. Ethelred wanted the Prometheus data, a predictive algorithm he designed that could destabilize global markets. They believed he had it, and they silenced him when he refused to cooperate. Clara sank into the chair, her legs no longer able to support her. The official story had been a sudden, tragic heart failure. But there had always been doubts, whispers from her grandmother that something was wrong, that he had been worried, that men had been watching their house. The truth, delivered with such cold certainty by this stranger, was a physical blow. They think he passed his research to you, Julian continued, his voice relentless, offering no comfort. They believe you hold the key to the Prometheus algorithm. Your little demonstration of spycraft at the coffee shop has, in their eyes, confirmed their deepest suspicions. That's insane, she whispered, her mind reeling, a chaotic storm of fear and fresh grief. My grandfather never gave me anything like that. I'm a data science student, not a spy. It doesn't matter what's true, Julian said, his expression as hard as the granite skyline behind him. It only matters what they believe. And they believe you are the loose end. They will come for you. And they will not be gentle. He let the words hang in the air, a death sentence delivered in a calm, rational tone. Clara's mind was a maelstrom, her grandfather murdered, and now the same faceless, monstrous people were coming for her. Why are you telling me this? She finally managed to ask, her voice trembling. Because your problem has now become my problem, he said. Ethelred is my enemy. You are now their target because of an action you took that benefited me. Therefore, you fall under my protection. It wasn't an offer. It was a declaration, a statement of fact. What does that mean exactly? It means you will be staying here in this building, he said, his voice leaving no room for negotiation. You will not go back to your apartment. You will not go back to your job. My head of security is already arranging for your essential belongings to be collected and swept. You will continue your studies remotely, through a secure connection I will provide. You will not have contact with anyone from your old life until I have neutralized the threat posed by Ethelred. This penthouse is the most secure private residence in New York City. Here, you will be safe. A gilded cage. She looked around the vast, empty, beautiful room. It was a prison made of glass and marble and money. I can't just disappear, she protested, a spark of defiance cutting through her fear. I have a life, friends, a job. The life you knew is over, Julian said, his tone final. At least for now. It ended the moment you decided to get involved. This is your reality now, Ms. Hayes. Ethelred will not stop until they have what they want, or until they are stopped. And I am the only one who can stop them. He stood and walked back to the window, his silhouette a stark, powerful figure against the glittering, indifferent skyline. You have a brilliant mind, Ms. Hayes. An analytical mind your grandfather helped to shape. I suggest you start using it. We need to find whatever he left for you, whatever key to Prometheus he hid, before they do. He turned back to face her, and in the fading afternoon light, his glacial eyes held a new, unsettling glint. Not just cold assessment, but something that looked unnervingly like possession. "Welcome to my world," he said, his voice a low, dangerous purr that sent a shiver down her spine. "The rules are very different here." The first week in the penthouse was a lesson in gilded imprisonment. Clara became a ghost in a fortress. Her world methodically shrunk to the confines of Julian Thorne's sterile, art-filled apartment in the sky. Her belongings arrived not in the familiar, worn cardboard boxes she'd packed them in, but in a series of sterile black pelican cases, delivered by silent men with coiled earpieces and impassive faces. Her laptop, her digital lifeline to her studies and the outside world, was taken from her. It was returned a day later, its familiar operating system replaced with a heavily encrypted, custom-built interface that felt alien and cold. Her personal phone was gone, replaced with a sleek, featureless satellite model that could only contact one number, that of Julian's head of security, a formidable, stone-faced man named Marcus. Every link to her old life had been systematically severed and replaced with a secure, monitored substitute. Julian himself was an enigma, a phantom in his own home. He was gone before she woke, a silent presence that left only the faint, expensive scent of his cologne in the air. He returned late at night, long after she had retired to the guest suite, a space larger and more luxurious than any apartment she could ever hope to afford. Yet it felt as suffocating as a cell. The silence was the worst part. It was an active, pressing silence, broken only by the distant, mournful cry of a siren from the city far below. Their only interactions were through terse, encrypted messages he sent via a dedicated slate-gray tablet left on her nightstand. Anomalies. Anything that breaks his established routine. He had granted her access to a digital treasure trove, a carefully curated and heavily redacted archive of her grandfather's life. Digitized NSA files, personal journals, research notes, even old family photographs. It was a staggering amount of data, and Clara, starved for purpose, threw herself into it. She found a strange, grim comfort in the familiar embrace of data analysis. It was a problem to be solved, a puzzle to be pieced together. A clearer picture of Elias Vance began to emerge from the fragmented files. He wasn't just a cryptanalyst. He was a visionary, a digital philosopher who saw the potential for data to become both the ultimate tool of liberation and the ultimate weapon of control. The Prometheus algorithm wasn't just a piece of code. It was his attempt to create a perfect system of checks and balances, an incorruptible digital consciousness that could predict and neutralize market manipulation and corporate espionage before it happened. It was a tool designed for justice. A tool she now understood Ethelred would twist into a weapon of total global domination. She worked tirelessly, building custom algorithms to search for hidden messages, cross-referencing journal entries with redacted NSA mission logs, trying to think, to feel, to see the world as her grandfather had. She filled a whiteboard with timelines, connections, and complex diagrams. But the final key, the core of Prometheus, remained elusive. It was as if a crucial piece of the puzzle had been deliberately removed, a final, impenetrable layer of encryption that defied all her efforts. The data was a locked room, and she was missing the key. One evening, her eyes burning from staring at the screen, unable to sleep, she found herself wandering into the penthouse's library. It was the only room in the entire apartment that felt lived in. A warm, welcoming space lined from floor to ceiling with thousands of books on history, philosophy, and economics. The air smelled of old paper and leather. She ran her fingers along the spines, a tactile connection to a world of tangible knowledge, a welcome respite from the cold, unforgiving glow of the monitor. "He preferred the tangible," a voice said from the doorway, startling her. She turned, her heart skipping a beat. Julian was leaning against the heavy oak frame, a glass of amber liquid swirling in his hand. He had shed his corporate armor. The severe suit was gone, replaced by simple black trousers and a soft, gray cashmere sweater. The change was profoundly disarming. It stripped away the layers of intimidation and made him seem less like a predator and more like a man. A tired, solitary man. "My father," he clarified, walking into the room, his footsteps silent on the thick Persian rug. "He believed you couldn't trust anything you couldn't hold in your hands. He built this library. He said a book's weight was the weight of its ideas." "I thought you built your own empire from nothing," Clara said, her curiosity momentarily overriding her ingrained caution. The official story, the legend of Julian Thorne, was one of self-made success. "I did," Julian said, his gaze distant, fixed on a leather-bound set of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. "After my father's was stolen from him." Ethelred Consortium didn't just appear overnight. They were built on the ruins of my family's company, a company my father spent his life creating. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. But for the first time, Clara detected a powerful current beneath the icy surface, a grief so old it had fossilized into a cold, simmering rage. They used illegal market manipulation, insider trading, digital sabotage, the very things your grandfather's algorithm was designed to stop. They destroyed him, financially and spiritually. He died a broken man. He finally looked at her, and the raw pain in his eyes was so stark, it made her flinch. "That is why I hunt them. It is not just business, Ms. Hayes. It is vengeance." The confession hung in the air. A bridge of shared loss suddenly formed between their two separate worlds. His fight was now her fight. Her grandfather's hidden legacy was the weapon he needed to avenge his father. The symmetry was both tragic and perfect. "I haven't found it," she admitted, her voice soft with a new, unfamiliar empathy. "I've searched everything, every file, every journal entry. It's not in the digital records. He must have hidden the final key somewhere else." Julian looked at her, his eyes holding a strange, new intensity. "Perhaps you're looking in the wrong place," he said slowly, thoughtfully. "My father taught me that the most valuable secrets are never written down in a ledger. They are hidden in memories, in rituals, in stories told to a loved one." He took a step closer, the space between them shrinking, becoming charged with an unspoken energy. "What did he tell you, Clara? What inside jokes did you share? What stories did your grandfather tell you that no one else in the world would understand?" His use of her first name, the first time he had done so, felt incredibly intimate in the quiet, book-lined room. The formal barrier between them had dissolved. His gaze dropped to her lips for a fraction of a second, and her breath hitched. Her mind raced, sifting through a lifetime of memories, of afternoons spent in her grandfather's dusty study, of bedtime stories and shared jokes. Most were mundane, the simple, loving interactions between a girl and her grandfather. But one resurfaced, a strange little riddle he used to tell her over and over, a game they played. What has a spine but cannot stand, a voice but cannot speak, and holds the world in its hand? A book, she whispered. The answer coming to her as it always had since she was a child. But it wasn't just a riddle. Of course it wasn't. It was a clue, a signpost. Her grandfather, the master of ciphers, had hidden his greatest secret inside a childhood game. She turned and ran from the library, her heart pounding with a sudden, electrifying certainty. She heard Julian's footsteps close behind her. In her room, she went to the black pelican case containing her grandfather's most personal effects. She pulled out a worn, leather-bound copy of Homer's The Odyssey, the binding soft and supple from years of use, a book he had read to her countless times. "He always told me it was the greatest story ever told," she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of excitement and grief. "A story about a man trying to find his way home." Her fingers, shaking, opened the cover. There, on the inside cover, on the yellowed end paper, was a single handwritten line that had not been there before. It must have been written in invisible ink, a final secret revealed only by the passage of time, the chemicals slowly oxidizing. Under the bright, focused light of her desk lamp, the faint, spidery tracing of his script became clear. P.S. The key is not in the journey, but in the name of the one who waited. "The one who waited?" Julian murmured, his voice a low rumble just over her shoulder. She could feel the warmth of his body, a solid, grounding presence behind her. Penelope. It wasn't just the name of Odysseus's faithful wife. It was a password. They returned to the main office, the tension between them a palpable, thrumming wire. Clara sat at the terminal, her fingers poised over the keyboard. On the primary archive, a final security layer she hadn't been able to breach, there was a single, blinking password prompt. She took a deep breath and typed it in, Penelope. The screen flickered, and the final layer of encryption dissolved. The archive unlocked. A single file was revealed, its name stark and simple. Prometheus Core Dat. As she initiated the decryption process, a piercing alarm blared through the penthouse, a shrill, insistent siren that shattered the silence. Red lights flashed along the ceiling, bathing the minimalist room in a hellish, pulsating glow. "Marcus!" Julian barked into his watch, his voice sharp as broken glass. "What is it? Report!" "They're in." Marcus's voice crackled back, strained and distorted by static. "Full system breach. They bypassed the firewalls. They're not hacking us from the outside." "Julian, the intrusion signal. It's coming from inside the house." Ethelred wasn't coming for them. They were already there. The main lights went out, plunging the penthouse into near-total darkness, illuminated only by the frantic strobing of the emergency lights and the steady, ominous glow of the monitor displaying the slow, steady progress of the decryption bar. "It's a Trojan horse," Clara said, her mind working furiously, the fear replaced by a cold, analytical clarity. "Someone on the inside, one of your staff, must have brought in a compromised device. They planted a sleeper virus in the network. They were waiting for this. They waited for us to unlock the final file. They aren't trying to steal it. They're trying to wipe it and us with it. Julian moved with a chilling, predatory calm. He slid open a hidden compartment beneath the polished granite of the desk and pulled out a sleek, black pistol, checking the magazine with an efficient, practiced movement. Marcus, Lockdown Protocol Omega. Seal the penthouse. No one gets in or out. Find the source. He turned to Clara, his face a grim mask in the flashing red light. How long? To decrypt? 10 minutes, she said, her fingers already flying across the keyboard, the familiar language of code a shield against the encroaching chaos. To stop their wipe command? Maybe 2. They're using a brute force erasure worm. I need to build a ghost wall, isolate the core server, and reroute their signal back on itself. A heavy thud echoed from the hallway, followed by the muffled, distinct foot-foot of a silenced firearm. You have 1 minute, Julian said, his voice deadly calm as he moved to flank the office doorway, the pistol held steady in a two-handed grip, a sentinel guarding her while she fought a war he couldn't see. The next 60 seconds were a blur of controlled chaos. Clara's world narrowed to the cascading lines of green and white code on her screen. She could hear Julian issuing quiet, clipped commands into his watch, directing his unseen security team through the darkened penthouse. She could smell the faint, acrid scent of cordite drifting from the hall, but all of it was background noise. Her mind was a quiet storm of logic, her fingers a blur as she typed, creating, defending, attacking in a silent, digital battlefield. She was no longer a barista, no longer a student. She was her grandfather's legacy, a cryptanalyst fighting for his life's work. Signal rerouted, she announced, her voice sharp, just as a heavy fist pounded on the solid oak of the office door. They're locked in a feedback loop. The wipe command is eating their own network now. Decryption is at 90%. The door splintered under the force of a battering ram, and a man in black tactical gear burst in, his weapon raised. Julian fired twice, 2 precise, deafening cracks that echoed in the confined space. The man fell without a sound. It's done, Clara whispered, her eyes fixed on the screen as the progress bar hit 100%. A new window opened, displaying the elegant, complex, and terrifyingly powerful source code of the Prometheus algorithm. With trembling hands, she dragged the core file to a secure, isolated thumb drive, a small silver stick she had plugged in moments before. She clicked eject and pulled it free just as the monitor went black, the system finally succumbing to the battle that had raged within it. Let's go, Julian said, grabbing her arm, his touch firm and grounding. He pulled her away from the dead desk. There's a panic room. He led her through the darkened apartment, moving with a silent, lethal grace that spoke of a life lived in the face of violence. They reached a section of the library wall, a seamless panel of dark mahogany. Julian pressed his palm against an unadorned section, and with a soft hiss of hydraulics, the panel slid open to reveal a reinforced steel door. Just as they were about to enter, a calm, familiar voice called out from the shadows of the living room. Going somewhere, Thorne? They turned. A man stepped forward, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his face a mask of cold, triumphant fury. It was the lead lawyer, Henderson, the man from the Gilded Bean. He held a gun, and it was aimed directly at Clara. You, Julian said, his voice laced with a quiet, venomous contempt. You were the mole. Ethelred makes a more compelling offer than loyalty, Henderson sneered. Their vision for the future is far more profitable. Now give me the drive, Thorne. And the girl. They have a few questions they've been wanting to ask her about her grandfather for a very long time. That's not going to happen, Julian said, positioning himself slightly, almost imperceptibly, in front of Clara, shielding her with his body. Don't be a fool! It's over! My team has control of the building! No, a new voice said, a voice that was cool, steady, and filled with a confidence Clara didn't know she possessed. It's just beginning. She stepped out from behind Julian's protective shadow. In her hand, she held the slate-gray tablet, its screen glowing brightly in the darkness. This is a live feed, Mr. Henderson, she said, her voice clear and strong, resonating with newfound authority. To every major news outlet on the Eastern Seaboard, the SEC, and the FBI's Cybercrime Division. It's broadcasting everything. A full, unredacted copy of the Ethelred Ledger, cross-referenced with your internal communications for the past 5 years. All unlocked and decrypted by Prometheus. She took a breath. It includes detailed records of your market manipulation, your political assassinations, and of course, the chemically induced murder of a retired NSA analyst named Elias Vance. Henderson's face went white, the color draining from it as if he'd seen a ghost. It was a good plan, Clara continued, her eyes locked on his, cold and unforgiving. A brilliant Trojan horse, but you made one mistake. The same mistake everyone seems to make. She allowed a small, sharp smile. You underestimated the barista. From the hallways, the distant sound of approaching sirens grew rapidly louder, a wail that signaled the end of his world. Henderson looked from the glowing tablet to the gun in his hand, his mind racing, searching for an escape that no longer existed. In that single, fatal moment of hesitation, Julian moved. It wasn't a fight. It was a disarm, a swift, brutal, and beautiful sequence of movements that left Henderson on the floor, gasping for air, his wrist broken and the gun skittering across the marble floor. As Marcus and his security team swarmed in to secure the traitor, Julian turned to Clara. The emergency lights cast long, dramatic shadows across his face. The adrenaline was still coursing through her veins, a wild, exhilarating fire, but for the first time in days, she felt a sense of profound calm. She wasn't a victim. She wasn't a pawn. You were magnificent, Julian said, his voice filled with a raw, undisguised admiration she had never heard from him before. I had a good teacher, she replied, her thoughts turning to her grandfather, a quiet man who had prepared her for a war he knew she would one day have to fight. In the days that followed, the Ethelred Consortium crumbled with spectacular speed. The encrypted ledger, backed by the undeniable analytical power of the Prometheus algorithm, was a corporate death warrant. Indictments were handed down from the highest levels of government and finance, assets were frozen, and an empire built on shadows collapsed into dust. Clara stood with Julian on the penthouse balcony, looking out at the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in deep, bruised hues of orange and purple. The threat was gone. The air felt different. She was free. The deal is concluded, Julian said, his voice quiet as he stood beside her. You're safe. I can have Marcus arrange for you to be taken back to your apartment in the morning. Everything will be as it was. She looked out at the sprawling, glittering metropolis, at the distant lights of Washington Heights where her old life was waiting for her. The beige apartment, the endless lattes, the quiet safety of her books. It felt like a lifetime ago. It felt like a life that belonged to someone else, a girl she no longer recognized. "What about Prometheus?" she asked, not looking at him. "It will be secured," he said. "Entrusted to a foundation. It will be used as your grandfather intended. A silent guardian watching over the digital world." "It needs someone to manage it," she countered, finally turning to face him. "Someone to direct it. Someone who understands the data. Someone who knows what it's like to be underestimated." A slow, genuine smile spread across Julian's face, a smile that finally reached his eyes and melted the last of the ice within them. "I was hoping you'd say that," he said. "I have a proposal for you. A partnership. I'm creating a new data security and ethics division at Thorne Industries. You would be its head. Your own lab, your own team. Complete autonomy to use Prometheus to hunt the monsters." "And the terms of this partnership?" she asked, raising an eyebrow, feeling the thrill of negotiating on equal footing. He stepped closer, closing the small space between them until she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "The terms," he said, his voice a low, intimate murmur, "are whatever you want them to be." He gently took her hand, his thumb tracing a slow, deliberate line over her knuckles. "And that's just the business arrangement." Clara looked into his eyes, no longer seeing a vulture or a king, but a man who, like her, was defined by the legacy of a man he loved. A man who had shown her a world she never knew she was capable of navigating. She had stepped into his world as a pawn, but she was leaving it as a queen. "I have a few conditions," she said, a playful, confident smile touching her lips for the first time. He leaned in, his voice a whisper against her ear, a promise of a future that would be anything but beige. "I'm listening."